There we go.
Yeah, so we're all good. All right, I'd like to welcome you all out to our board meeting this evening. Jen, can we have, who's doing roll call? Jeremy?
Oh, good. All right. Trustee Ahmad.
Here.
Trustee Adams. Here. Trustee Height.
Here.
President Nation.
Here. Thank you. And then,
And Malinali Lopez is absent.
Our student board, yeah.
gotcha. Thank you. Let's see, do we have any public comment on our closed session? Seeing none, okay. Let's see, we went through all that. Flag salute by myself. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. Actually, I did this out of order, didn't I? Now we got the roll call. Superintendent Decker, do we have anything to report out of closed session?
Nothing to report.
All right, thank you. Any adjustments to the agenda? I know of one where we're going to move 6.3. We're going to move it up right before, right at section 5. So we're going to do that first. Are there any other adjustments? Anybody?
I have one more. I would like to table item 4.3 to a future board meeting.
I'm sorry, which one?
4.3, it's not ready for tonight.
Okay, so 4.3 is out. Okay, and then 3.4, our student board member Kai Heflin, he is unavailable tonight, and so we won't have that. And then now on these consent items, we're just going to skip 4.3. We don't have to move all those numbers up, right? Yeah. Okay. Anything else, anybody? All righty. Good, then I will go to 3.2. I'll turn that over to Superintendent Decker.
Well, to start, I'd like to present a plaque to Stephanie Ahmad for her dedication and leadership to the students of our district while she was board president for the past year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say thank you? I was not expecting this. This is very nice. Nice surprise. Thank you so much. It
Very
was a
welcome.
real honor being board president and serving in that capacity.
Well deserved.
I'm just going to say, I think you did an awesome job. I appreciate the high bar you set for me to walk underneath. So thanks. It'll be back to normal for you, Bill, when it's your turn. I'd like to go to section 3.3.
I have one more thing.
Oh, sorry.
President Carnation. So January is School Board Recognition Month. And we just wanted to at least acknowledge the work that you guys do. I don't think I'm going to read this entire thing, but I just want to say, school board members, you guys put in a lot more time than anybody really knows. It's all volunteer based. It's very much appreciated, I think, on all of our ends, especially with our school board specifically. You guys are a great team, very thoughtful, and you hold us accountable. So I just want to thank you. And I could read all of this, but I just don't feel the need. So that's really what I'd like to say. And just say that January, for all of you out there, just appreciate these guys because not every school board is the same. So thank you.
I'll just share. It seems like I haven't been here for months. We went down in December to the school boards conference in San Diego. And it's always cool to hear the new ideas and innovations, and you scratch your head and think, why aren't we doing that? And, well, we never thought of that. And the other piece is you get a real reflection in the mirror about how good we got it here. I will just share there is a district that's Malibu and areas like that, where they have 7 trustees. 3 trustees are leading recall against the other 4 trustees. That's the worst one that I heard. But yeah, we're fortunate. And I think we're fortunate because even with the passions and sometimes dysfunction in our town, there is a certain amount of respect. And I think that comes because we come to meetings and we're ready, mostly because of you all that are out there serving our community and our kids. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
All righty. Thank you, Bill. Moving on to section 3.3, is there any public comment on any open session items? Anybody? Seeing none. All right, we'll move to 3.5, superintendent's report.
Yes. So COVID's obviously a topic that is front and center. I'm not going to talk about that right here because we have a presentation later on. I do want to talk about, give you an update on negotiations. We're actively in negotiation with CSEA and WDEA. CSEA, we're currently working on a salary study. And with WDEA, we're working through a number of topics. We jointly decided to put a pause. We wanted to see what the governor's budget was going to look like. And it looked good. So leading into that, he's proposed an increased COLA for next year up to 5.33. That's up from 2.48. So that's great for us. That's ongoing funds. And then he's proposed a number of things, but specifically that I want to go through is a difference in the way you calculate ADA. So currently it's either the current year ADA or the prior year, whichever one is greater. He's proposed to average the past 3 years potentially, which can only help us. So let's hope something like that goes through, because as we're a declining enrollment district, and so are many other districts in the state, it's hard to, as Bill always says, right size as you're declining in the moment. It's just really difficult to do so. So it'd be nice to have potentially an extra year in the lag. So many other things, but I think those are the things I'd like to point out.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's
So
okay.
when you mention ADA, for those watching at home,
Yes,
that's
sir.
the daily attendance, the average daily attendance of the students enrolled in our district that are showing up to campus.
Yes, California does things differently than almost everywhere else. It is based on enrollment. Almost everywhere else, we're based on how often kids come to school. And we usually run around 95, 96%. Also, universal pre-K, TK, we've officially let families know that we are essentially open for business for all 4-year-olds whose birthdays are on or after September 1st. And you're going to get a presentation later that will detail really our, say, marketing strategy, if you will, or really how we're going to go about making sure everybody knows what our program is. That's my report.
Jeremy, do you know, on the ADA, is it going to be do we get to choose which one we want? Or is
Yes,
it,
it's always going to be the best case scenario for us if it goes through, whatever is
Got it.
best for us.
Do you think that he might actually even revise that with all the schools, us included, that's having, such a big chunk of people that are out, students right now that are out, that's going to really drive our ADA average for this year down quite a bit.
Rich, I actually asked the question. Austin and I were just in a workshop and I asked that question of where was school capital advisors, the exact question. And really, we didn't get a very positive answer. It wasn't being discussed in Sacramento that they may hold us harmless again, is kind of what I gathered. I think their fix is this 3-year average instead. So not great for us, right? But we'll see.
Okay.
I think enough of us are going to squawk that it might become an issue. It's still just January.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, any questions or? All righty, moving on to 3.6, association reports. Do we have Pete or Brad, anything that you guys like to bring up this time? Oh, okay. I don't see.
Brad's not here today.
Brad's not here. Okay, very good. 3.7, trustees reports. Any trustees have some comments?
Yeah, Rich, I just wanted to get a placeholder if we could with the superintendent. It's not on the agenda for discussion. But we have seen in the newspaper, one of our trustees is running for town council. Good luck to you, Stephanie. And what I'd like to get on for February is a early discussion about what means and methods are available for us to fill a vacancy should it occur. I think we know from the other body that sits up here, there is appointment or election or let a year go by. And also, do we start that proactively, letting people know and how we would do that. So again, it's not on the agenda to talk about the merits of that, but I did want to acknowledge that things go well for our former president. We may have a vacancy, and I think we need to proactively address how we're going to deal with that. Okay, thank you. That's the only thing.
Great. Eric or Stephanie, anything?
I would just make mention that I've been in contact with the booster club for the Jaguar boosters, and they are looking to have new officers. So if you're interested in becoming more involved in the booster club as a president or treasurer, all the different offices are available at this time. So you can reach out to them. They've been doing lots of social media advertising and things as well, and emails. So that's something that they'd like some help with. And I also attended the Cali PTA meeting a couple nights ago, and they, of course, are always looking for new members. There's a population of around 1,000, I think, at Cali now, and they have like 158 members. So some of those families are doubling up, of course. They've got multiple kids. But anybody that's part of the Cali community or not, anybody that's in the district or in the community, please support and join the Cali PTA. It's just a $10 yearly fee, but they do a lot of good fundraisers and a lot of outreach and support our programs really well. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple comments. One is, good luck, Stephanie. The town's gain is our loss, and I'm sure if you get elected, you'll do an awesome job. They, like you have here for the last 3 years. I would like to bring up, I kind of might have made a little bit of a boo-boo. I was asked if we wanted to have our meetings in here or if we wanted to have them in Zoom, and I just kind of, well, here, of course, and then I didn't kind of think to ask my cohorts when I made that comment. And so anyhow, if, while it's not on the agenda, we can talk about it. Okay, so so anyhow, whether we meet in person or we do it over Zoom, I'd like to basically get comments. I know I can explain to you why I think we should meet in public, but I'd like everybody to be able to have that option to say how they feel or whatever. And so this is myself slapping my own hand. So does anybody have any comments or questions?
Sure, I'll comment. So I'll just start by saying I am running for town council. Probably won't talk about it much here since I'm still on the school board and this is my role until that election happens. And if I'm elected, that's when we would, I would be going away or moving over to the town council.
From that seat to this one.
Yeah. But thanks for the acknowledgement and for being proactive about thinking about what you would do to fill a vacant seat. I think that's an important conversation. On the board meetings in person, I thought we had earlier had a discussion, and I thought it was very compelling that if we're asking students and teachers to go back to the classroom in person, that we would also feel comfortable meeting in person since we're basically asking for the same thing. So that's kind of the philosophy I bring to our meetings, is that if our students are in person, then we're in person, and if they're remote, we're remote. So I'm comfortable staying in person. I think this wave is subsiding, and we have 2 board members who are not here tonight. It's really impacting many people, this recent wave, but I think we're being proactive about being safe as well. So I'm comfortable, but I'm interested in hearing from everyone else.
I completely agree. And just as if you are not comfortable and you're a student, you can be on independent study. And so if you are not comfortable, you could teleconference in with us, or we could do a Zoom at the same time, that kind of thing. We did that with Bill last month when he was unable to attend. So there's options around that as well. But I would choose to be here in person and on camera and available to the public the way we are now. And if people are uncomfortable with that, they can tune in and watch at home, or they can join us on the recordings and things like that.
I concur with what's been said. I think having these in person is good. One piece, although it was messy and difficult to manage, was we seemed, and I don't know how we know how many people might be watching on Channel 27 from TV land, but we seemed to have a broader engagement when we were on Zoom for both the positive and disruptive parts of that. And I don't know if we could look to say, I was able to Zoom in, I think almost by special arrangement through the status as a trustee. But I would like to see if we're able to facilitate a little bit more external comment. I think we did a good job of gathering it in writing. But that was a thing that I liked, as many, I work with a lot of public agencies as their counsel on Brown Act issues. And one good thing in the last 18 months is really the participation of the community being able to connect a little bit better with meetings. So I don't know how we may look at that, but I would maybe I'm looking back in the back row there about our Minister of Technology to just think, is there a way we could do that to not have it be completely disruptive, but sort of something in between simply watching? Are we on Facebook Zooming as in addition?
So we're
YouTube.
actually, I just looked it up. We're on YouTube right now and there are only 4 people watching.
Okay,
But
we
we
must be
are-
doing things okay then.
I think we are.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's a solution that doesn't need a problem to find, but that was one piece that I found was a nice development when we were virtual, but going forward, I'm okay doing live meetings. I think we're all very cautious and cognizant of it.
Thanks.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Thanks, Stephanie. By the way, are those 4, they are family members, or can you tell, or?
I don't know.
Because I want to know if my wife, there's
I
7,
don't
obviously,
know
they're
who it
getting
is,
scared.
but we'll see if we can figure that out and,
Well, I'd like to say that
and text them.
yeah,
Jen is
the,
one of them. We know that.
I'd like to say that the fact that we've been together now for 3 years, I knew exactly how y'all would feel about this. So I just made that step, but that wasn't the case. So I just kind of made a boo-boo. Is there any public comment of anybody that would like to say something, anybody about this particular topic of meeting in public? Nope. And then Bill, to your comment about the Zoom, there were some aspects of Zoom that I liked. One, it was nice to not have to add some travel time to get to the meetings. And we did seem to get some extra people. So I've seen other Zoom meetings. I think there might have to be some laws changed or some things, because I think you kind of have to either do one or the other.
We'll look at this option.
But I like the idea that people could be at home with their kids, watch our meeting, and then if there was a comment they wanted to make, they could Zoom in and we could hear their comment. It was kind of valuable. And so anyhow, to your point, I think there might be a hybrid way that, they do that? Yeah, I thought the people that talked had to be in the, anyhow, sure.
Okay.
All righty. Anyhow, still, thank you all. All righty. We're going to move on now to approval of the minutes 3.8. I'd like to have a motion before a little discussion.
I'll move.
Okay, Stephanie.
Second.
Stephanie's got the first, and then Bill's got the second. The only thing that I'd like to bring up is just that on the approving the calendar, that we are going to be discussing that down below. So I don't know, Jeremy, do we need to, at 6.2, we're talking about moving the calendar. So do we approve it up here, and then we look to change that one date down below? 6.2.
We're approving the minutes from last time. We're
No,
not
because-
approving anything new yet.
Because 3.8, it includes the calendar because we,
Oh, so don't
Oh,
worry about, okay,
okay.
got it. I didn't know if that had some
It'll be in the
impact or
new
something.
minutes.
Okay, so we got a first from Stephanie and a second from Bill. Any discussion, other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And one absent, and a student is gotten, so it'd be 4-0-1. All right, I know that Jen's not here.
But she is following along, so she'll track.
Very, okay. I didn't know if we had to do something extra. Thank you. All righty, section 4, consent items. I'd like to turn this over to Vice President Bill Adams.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Under the consent items, we have items listed on the agenda 4.1 to 4.14. Item 4.3 has been withdrawn and tabled for a future date. I would move that the board consider approval of agenda items 4.1 to 4.14, except 4.3.
I'll make motion to approve the consent action items.
I'll second it. Any discussion? Anybody?
I had one just under 4.8, which is our certificated seniority list of our 278 certificated teachers. I know their labor group president is in the back row. And without identifying all 278 and thanking, I'll notice that President Stefanisco is number 9. But what struck me is we have 3 teachers that have been teaching since the late 80s. And I think that's really cool. And then a whole bunch in the 90s and going forward. So thank you to all you teachers and Pete, you're here, and a couple of other certificated members. Appreciate very much all that you do. My only point on that.
Pete, you're almost there. We only medaled the top 8, so you got to stick around a little while longer.
Well, I'd be number 5 if I was in the district here, but in my district, I'm number 2. So
Oh, my God.
Number 2. Woo. Shooting for number 1, right? All righty.
Oh, I had 2 of the teachers that are in the top 10, just little trivia,
Okay,
when I was in high school and middle school. So that's fun.
okay.
Just a testament to this is a great place to work.
Absolutely.
All righty. So thank you, Eric. Let's go ahead and have a vote. All those in favor, aye, say aye.
Aye.
I
Any opposed? And 1 absent. All right, so that's going to be 4, 0, and 1. All righty. So now we're going to move to the 6.3. We're going to bump that up to our next place. And is that all right?
yes.
Oh, we are. Okay, yeah. And so
You're right.
someone keeps telling me that's not right. Oh, I'm sorry. Got it. 6.3, consideration of approval of CA plus SA proposal to update the facility master plan. And this will be presented by Austin.
I'm actually going to kick this to Brian, if that's all right. I think it makes the most sense. So we went through a process, and I'd like Brian to kind of detail the process because really Van Pelt led us through that. So Brian, if you could come up and explain.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board of Trustees. So, we went out for a facilities master plan update. We did a request for proposals on this back in late November. We went through the whole process. We received a total of 5 proposals from architecture firms, and we selected to interview 3 of them. And then that interview process, it's CASA, what we call them CASA, to shorten it a little bit. They stood out because they're a smaller architectural firm. They would be able to meet the needs of the district, and their proposal was one of the lowest proposals out of the 5 firms. So with the facilities master plan update, we will develop a planning committee with the community. I believe Jeremy and Jen have already been reaching out, trying to gather up that committee. And then once we gather those up, we'll have monthly meetings with the architect firm and go through the evaluations. And what those evaluations entail is we'll evaluate each site. There we go. We'll evaluate each site, do a demographic analysis of the city of Windsor and the district. We'll do a capacity analysis of each of the school sites. We'll analyze what state funding options we have available. We'll do an equity analysis as well. And then doing all those processes, we'll develop a needs list, like a priorities needs list like we had for the bond we just did. And with those needs, we'll have cost estimates. And along with that, we'll develop educational specifications. We'll work with the teachers and community to develop that for any new projects we have coming along the way. Then once we go through that process, we'll develop a document, the master plan, and then present that to the board for approval.
Could I add one thing? They were the lowest bidder, but that's not why they were chosen. They actually stood out the most. So even in spite of whatever the other bids were, they were our most impressive presentation. So that was a great plus for us, but not the reason necessarily that we chose them.
Did anybody have any questions or anything? I'm just curious, Stephanie, with that Title VI or for the Indian tribe and that study, is that something that we'll incorporate with this, or is it separate? Or?
It's separate.
It is?
Yeah, it's not necessarily part of this.
Got it. Okay.
Similar process is what might happen, but it's totally separate.
Got it. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, and sort of from the timeline, just for folks, all 7 of them at home. What does the timeline look for the overall project? I know it's in some of the materials we got, but if you could
Yeah,
just share that.
so we're trying to streamline this as fast as possible because we really need a priorities needs list to see what projects we need to put on the forefront. So we have a 6-month timeline.
Okay.
So we would expect to present the master plan by July.
Thank you.
So you'll present it to us, or they'll be done by then?
Well, it will be hopefully completed by June, and we'll meet with the community and kind of refining, and so the draft will be ready by June, and then the plan is to present by July.
And it may
Or
be
August,
it may be
yeah.
August
Yeah, I
when we
forget
actually
we don't
present.
have
We
meetings.
really wanted to push the timeline to make sure that we had this thing in place for next year.
Mhm.
That was the hope, and so that's why it's pretty aggressive timeline.
Yeah.
A lot of these take a year, but we want to make sure this is ready to go.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because I thought they might need some access to certain things during the summertime that maybe they can't right now, so I didn't know.
The majority of it's front loaded, where the longest part of the process is really community engagement and getting feedback. So they're going to front load doing inspection of our facilities and really all of that, and then we'll get to the community part, which takes the longest.
And
the
we can
feedback.
work around the school's schedule as well. There's no problem there.
Yeah, one of the things that I found impressive, both when the town did its general plan update, and I know many of us were over at Our Lady of Guadalupe and their conference center on the Civic Center sort of chart walk, and people are there, is if we could proactively look about having evening or maybe even a weekend day where we do it, in the high school theater. Good, would be marvelous if we had 300 people who would come, or somewhere where we could do it, where people could come and see, the maps and the charts of the schools and whatnot to really try and get that input. And, people are going to come or they're not going to come, but I certainly have found those experiences to be helpful, right? And if people are interested, I'd like to cultivate that opportunity for them to come and look and participate.
And we got the impression from CASA that they're willing to work their design around things like that, what we want them to do.
Yeah,
That was a
just
big
gonna
part.
mention, I was looking at the proposal, and they stated they would meet whenever the district would need them.
They seem nimble. Some of the
Yeah.
other individuals that we interviewed said, this is our process and this is what it is, but CASA really seemed nimble, and that's what we were looking for.
Very good. All right, anything else from anybody?
I think we need to see if there's any questions from the public, and then we need to make a motion to approve this.
Got it. All right, Brian, I don't know if you, hang on for a second. Is there anybody in the audience that has anything that they'd like to talk about on this? All righty, see you then. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, can we get a motion to approve this?
Sure, I will make a motion, and thank you, Brian, for describing the process and for your help with this.
A second.
So Stephanie's, and then Bill. All right, and then any more discussion amongst us? Nope. All righty, can we have a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope.
Okay.
All right, so that's 4-0 and 1. All righty, now we'll go back up to 5.1, COVID-19 Superintendent's Update. Superintendent Decker?
And Pete and I are going to tag team this one. So he's going to present on some of the slides. I'm going to present on some. And Pete started it off.
Okay, thank you.
It is indeed. I hope it works. Good evening, Trustee Maud. Good evening, Trustee Adams, Trustee Heights, and President Carnation. Nice to have you here this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to present, and howdy to all the families who are listening this evening. So a lot has changed over the last 2 weeks. Hang in there. We're going to go over just some of the basics. And I also want you to know that the team that we've developed at Windsor Unified, we've got it. We're working hard. We're going to get through this surge. And when things settle down, I think we're going to find that we have done a pretty decent job here. So this is just some general information that'll help you kind of center yourself as we move forward with the discussion, because there's going to be a lot of back and forth, especially when we move into the difference between guidelines for staff and for students and home exposure versus at-school exposure. But if you really just think of in terms of isolation and quarantine, went from 10 to 5, and there's going to be a test on day 5, almost regardless of either one. In some cases, it's a recommendation. In other cases, it's an absolute and a release on day 6. And that if you can just think that those things are in place, it's easier to kind of keep up with all of the changes, a lot of which have happened just in the last week. And so a quick apology to our families who have had to suffer through all of the changes and all of the notifications that we put out to all of them. So thanks for hanging in there. And the rationale for a lot of these changes coming from California Department of Health and coming from our county is that the majority of these changes are happening in the first week of contracting the virus. And so it's a focus where I think we need to be, which is masking and encouraging vaccines and testing to keep up with the ongoing condition. And stop me if you have any questions. Some terms, just so we're all on the same page here. Isolation is always in terms of somebody who has COVID. If you have COVID, you're on isolation. If you were exposed to COVID, you're on quarantine. And I know a lot of, oftentimes I hear them used interchangeably, but it's very specific language. So when I'm saying isolation, I mean somebody who has COVID. And when I say quarantine, I mean somebody who has been exposed to COVID. And just so you know, the pace at which these things change, I didn't update the fully vaccinated, and those dots, the bullet points down there are already out of date as of 2:30 this afternoon. So we now have 4 distinct levels. We have unvaccinated, which is not vaccinated or partially vaccinated. We have fully vaccinated, which is Series 1 and Series 2. We have booster eligible, which is a person who is Series 1, Series 2, and eligible for booster. And we have up to date, which is a person who has the trifecta. You got all your Series 1, your Series 2, and you've had your booster. So when I am speaking about those terms, that's kind of what I'm referencing. So I've attempted to, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. For quarantine and exposed, is that criteria still more than 15 minutes unmasked, 6 feet, or has that changed as well?
That has not changed.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you for that distinction. Yes. We are still following the same basic quarantine guidelines in definition of what an exposure is. So I've attempted to pair up like items. So the staff and student isolation protocols are the same. So if you have COVID, you are going to experience a 5-day isolation period. We try to determine when the onset of symptoms were because we will use that as day 0 and day 1 is the day after symptom onset. If we have no symptoms, which is actually occurring quite a bit lately, then we just use the day after the test. And you count 5 days out from there. And then day 6, assuming that you have got a negative test on day 5, you can return to school either as a student or a staff member on that 6th day. We are finding that quite a few people are testing positive on that 5th day and are requiring an antigen test following that to get back to school. And that is a distinction I want to make here, and I'll make it a couple of times. We are asking students and staff on that 5th day to use an antigen test, which is the rapid test, not the PCR test. And for reasons I'll get into toward the very end of this presentation. Okay, quarantine guidance. So quarantine guidance represents the bulk of the change. And it's also kind of the most convoluted in that the students have a different set of parameters, staff have a different set of parameters, and in-home versus at work is also a separate thing. So I've kind of categorized it as in-home and then at work or at school. So your in-home exposure is the same. So students and staff who are vaccinated, partially vaccinated, or previously infected, you're good to go. You're just going to want to monitor for symptoms, and you are going to want to test and isolate if you experience symptoms, but you are still free to go back to school as long as you are not symptomatic. Unvaccinated staff who are exposed in the home and unvaccinated students who are exposed in the home, they have to quarantine for 5 days, test on day 5, wear well-fitting masks, and monitor for symptoms. Yeah.
I kind of got it in the middle of your sentence there, but you said something about had previously been tested positive or had
Correct.
been sick in the past.
Correct.
Is that still counting with the different variants that we're dealing with now? If
It
you
does.
had an original COVID in 2020 and now you get Omicron virus variant, is that still considered, would you get it a second time, basically?
So current infections within the last 90 days is what they're saying. So if you've been COVID positive within the last 90 days, you basically, you're not required to test, and you do benefit from some of the exemptions of, in terms of quarantine. But then after that period ends, and you are expected to then follow the quarantine guidelines unless you've been vaccinated within that time period. Yep. Okay, so this is change in work exposures, and staff at work exposures are the same basically as home exposures. So it is unvaccinated staff are, they must follow the quarantine guidelines, and vaccinated, partially vaccinated, or previously infected individuals are able to enjoy the exemption, go back to work. Let's see here. So this is probably the biggest change in all of the quarantine guidance, and it has deep impacts because some of the populations that were most deeply affected are the kids when they have to quarantine for long periods of time, especially if they've been exposed at school and then they get home and they get re-exposed, and it just extends. It can be very detrimental. So the CDPH recently put out what's called a group tracing approach. And one of the things that I think we should key in on here is, regardless of your vaccination status, regardless of whether or not you're wearing a mask, regardless of whether or not you were within 6 feet for 15 minutes or over a 24-hour period, you may stay in school, you may go to practice, you may do all of the things that you can do. As long as you are not experiencing symptoms, you can be going to school and you can go to practice. They should get tested within 3 to 5 days. This is a recommendation. It is not a mandate. They should continue to wear a face mask, isolate, and test if symptoms develop. But it's a big change in the guidance, in that it allows a lot of students who would previously have been put into quarantine, into quarantine, back at school, back in their seats. Yeah.
So regardless of vaccination status or masking, if those things happen, then you can go back to school.
If you're not symptomatic, that's correct.
And that's a school call or personal call or county
Well,
health call?
This is guidance from the county and the state. So we're allowed to do this. There's some caveats, there's some notifications, and I'm going to get to kind of the specifics of what we need to do. But the rationale is students who are testing and monitoring are less likely to carry the virus to campus. So it's a recognition of a shorter contagious period, a quicker and broader response. And it kind of seems like CDPH is accepting that it's right now, it's everywhere. And if we continue to enforce, instant quarantines, we're going to not have students in school because everyone has COVID or is sitting next to somebody with COVID. And the moment we find that out with the level of testing that we're doing right now, and we'll get to that in a minute, everyone is going to test positive, and the person sitting next to you is not vaccinated, they're automatically out of school. I think it was a nod to, we need to keep kids in school if they're not, and I'm kind of editorializing here, but reading between the lines, that it's important to keep kids in school if they are not symptomatic. And I heard as much from Dr. Mace in her webinar presentation on whatever night that was, I guess Tuesday night. Right. So it's an important change, and I think it's one, I was excited to see it because I really want to keep all the kids in school if we can.
Right. And that's the reason why I brought up, because if that's the case now, I know part of our decision process thinking, at least about having kids wearing masks outside, was to avoid some of that. So if we, as a board, if we chose to not have the kids wearing the masks outside, it looks like they're now able, if they don't have any symptoms and what have you, that they could be in school.
So
So I'm wondering if our old policy is now outdated.
I'm going to let you all decide that, but I think one of the key things you're kind of leaning on here is the contact tracing, which is not happening. So
Okay.
they're basically saying we're not contact tracing. We're not doing the specific. After I asked my entire staff to please send me your seating charts, and they were diligent about getting to me, the CDPH basically said, you don't need to do that anymore. We send out like a blanket class notification. Hey, someone in your class had COVID. If you have symptoms, you should go test.
And Pete, was this a week and a half ago about when this came out?
Yeah.
About
yeah.
a week and a half.
Yes.
It's taken us some time to spin
Figure
the
it.
wheels on this. And I had to, get it put into a document that was legible and then I had to adjust for the multiple changes that occurred in the interim. But it is I think what you're talking about, Rich, is the no contact tracing element to this, which more or less is what stymied a lot of the elementary school staff.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
it
I
was
think this is a
constant
good development,
interaction.
and I think it's a great step forward. I know that it seemed like forever ago, but a few months back when we were talking about whether we're going to have the kids wear masks and at eating time and 14 minutes and the different things like that, one of the considerations was that by having the kids mask, except for the 14 minutes when they're eating, it was going to give us the opportunity to have kids in school more. And it sounds like that hurdle has been removed. And so regardless of masking or any of this other stuff. So if it, because mentally I was kind of thinking that I wasn't going to bring up that discussion point again for maybe another month because of the big surge and everything that's going on.
Sure.
And I'm still probably leaning that direction, but I want us to be thinking that, well, at least for me, a lot of my considerations of why I voted that way before, or not voted, we didn't do it that way. It was like more of a direction, right? That direction was more along the lines of it would help all the kids stay in school. That's no longer a hurdle for us. I'm kind of leaning more towards maybe we leave it up to the parents of what they want to do, but that's a different discussion. Or I don't know if it's a different discussion, but it's kind of,
I think maybe it's at the end of this discussion, we decide if we want to have that discussion. So maybe we finish this and then
Sure.
you guys discuss.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that part of it right.
So
Thanks.
in that vein, there's the bullet. We do group tracing, 1, 2, 3, 4 down. It says continue to wear a face mask. Is that focused on the sharing the indoor air inside the classroom? Or do you know what the context is of the scope of that bullet?
That's the individual who is exposed. So your unvaccinated individual who's exposed is expected to then wear a face mask for 10 days. So
That's indoor though, correct, Pete? Outdoor is not specified.
correct. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So
Okay, that was my
to your
question.
point,
Okay,
yes.
thank you, Pete. Please press on.
And I think a big piece of this also is the trusting of the families saying, yes, I'm symptomatic, or no, I just need my kid to go to school because I don't have daycare. We don't want to fight that battle. I'm not going to blame somebody, but at the same time, we've got to be very cautious because one kid can infect 20 very simply in a school setting. So that's an issue we have to be cautious about and cognizant of.
I'll take you through this. I'm not going to go nuts on this slide. I think you can see that we've had a couple of different periods where we've had a lot of COVID in our community. And this just shows the testing positivity right now. And it's higher than it's ever been. I think we all know that already, but I at least wanted to give you the stats. And you can see the new cases per 100,000. You can see original COVID. You see the Delta variant. And now you see Omicron. So we've got a lot of new cases. I think that's the takeaway I'd like you to have with these. I've shared these slides every time I've given a presentation. I wanted to continue to do so.
I know that when we were originally starting this almost 2 years ago now, we were worried about, a 3% or a 7% or
Yep.
whatever the numbers were. I saw on the news just before coming here tonight that Northern California, it may have just been more the Central Bay Area, but it was 23%.
That's where
So
we're at.
that's where you're showing here is that we don't have 2 or 3 cases. We have 200 or 300 cases now in our
Yeah.
town, in our
Correct.
school kids. So.
And this is county data. Pete's going to actually take us through our school data. You could see on the left-hand side, kind of the case rate. Well, and you see by vaccination status. So overall, we got about 223 people per 100,000 residents on average, and about 415 of those are unvaccinated, 177 vaccinated. And then if you look down below for the positivity, you can see that we're about 21%, Eric, to your point. So yeah, we used to be talking about 8% all the time, right? That was purple. We're way above that. It's just a different time and kind of different metrics completely. And then, I didn't put this on before, but they've come out with some new data that I thought would be helpful for you guys to see, and it's hospitalizations and deaths by age. And you can see for the age group that you guys are talking about, up to age 17, really, there have been, 32 hospitalizations, and there have not been any deaths in Sonoma County. There have been in California, but not in Sonoma
So
County.
this is the whole time period of COVID. that
This is the whole
covers.
time period.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
And-
that is a number that I look at just when I'm kind of seeing the severity of how it's impacting. I look at hospitalizations and deaths. Like even I still see that there still are some, but it seems to be, and maybe if you could answer this, it's at a lower proportion than it was in earlier variants. Is that true? Like the hospitalizations and deaths, if overall, and I think it trends towards unvaccinated versus vaccinated.
Yes, the last time I did the math, the overall percent of cases compared to hospitalizations, we were still lower as a percent of
Okay.
hospitalizations with the numbers that we're experiencing
Wow.
now. So
And Stephanie, I think to your point, that's the next graph.
Oh, okay.
So if you look at the timeline of COVID-19 deaths, you can see where there were a greater amount. 2021, right, December was the highest proportion of deaths by COVID. And then you see right now we have very high rates
Right.
of testing positivity, but our deaths are fairly low.
Which is a
And not to make
positive
light of
thing
any
in
of
a
this,
way,
but
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to, one quick thing, Malinali, who's not here, wanted to pass along that she thinks you're doing a great job and just wanted to say thank you.
thank you.
Just on those, the 15 and the 17 of that age group,
yes.
I know that I don't know if they've done it yet, and I don't know if these are included or not, but they're trying to go back and say, hey, what are just strictly the COVID numbers?
Mhm.
Because a lot of kids, example, kids playing something, breaks their arm, gets hurt, they go to the hospital. They went to the hospital for a broken something, but they happened to also test, and then they found that they were COVID
Sure.
positive, even though they were asymptomatic. I think they're trying to go back and try and separate those numbers. I don't know if this is separated yet or not, because I think that that's
I don't know.
all cases
I
still.
couldn't tell you that,
They don't do
Rich.
a for COVID or with COVID breakdown.
Right.
But
I think they're trying
anecdotally,
to.
I've read the same, and it's across the board. You can listen to NPR or Fox, and they report the same exact thing, which is a high percentage of people who are going to the hospital are then diagnosed with COVID, although they're there for something else. And it does skew the numbers, but our percentages would just then drop even lower in terms of the amount of cases per hospitalization rate.
I think I was referring actually more to, I think what Dr. May said, the one that about a week ago when she was on, and don't hold me to this, but I thought she said something around, it was either 43 or 53% of the numbers were where they were in there just for COVID, and the other ones were they had some other reason why they went into the
So right
hospital.
now, I actually do know this number because we met today
Okay.
with Dr. May. So she said that it's about 35%
Oh, it
of
is.
the beds, because it's always about ICU bed utilization, right? And about 35% of those beds are COVID related and the rest are not. But
so
they're still
even
feeling
more.
overwhelmed because they're having issues with discharging people who have come in. Because once you come in, and let's say you're homeless, you can't simply discharge that person. And so there are many not asymptomatic. There are people who are no longer symptomatic that are occupying a lot of those beds. And so it's making it tough on our hospitals.
Got it.
Any questions? Yeah.
All right.
Back to you.
So cases in our district, well, this has easily been the largest couple of weeks in the pandemic for us. And I think we all recognize that. And just as you're looking at the data and you're absorbing the numbers there, I just kind of want to put it in perspective. So I work at the high school and I do all of the on the grounds notifications and family outreach at the high school along with Lori Monty. And prior to, so basically between August 16th and December 17th, we had 31 active cases on our campus. And I came in on December 27th and started working, and I spoke over the course of that week to 28 families. And I was bracing for impact, but I did not know what was coming. I thought we were ready. We had made preparations. I hired extra people for testing. We were ready to go. And you'll see the testing numbers are astronomical. It was 409, but I think we say 400 on our slide. The first day we got back, so January 3rd, we tested 409 people. So there were a lot of active cases and a lot of testing. But let's see here.
You had to make the graph bigger, like a math problem.
Right?
I mean, it looks like, there's a little blue there on that first week of 11/8, but
Yeah.
that's probably like, 6, 8, 9 people, which was a big deal back then.
It was.
Now it doesn't show up as a speed bump.
Actually, when I look at that chart, the thing that came to my mind was, holy heck, aren't we glad that we got on this a long time ago so you were able to get a lot of this stuff in place?
Yeah.
Because if week 113 and 110, if that would have happened in August,
Yeah.
we'd have got knocked on our backside. And so it's kind of like what business they call a slow rollout. We kind of had our looks in history. We kind of had a slow rollout
Yeah, we did.
of you'd be pulling your hair out.
Well, a lot of props to Chris and Jeremy for getting in early and organizing the Maxim staff that we have that supported our families throughout all of this, and jumping on the Crisis Go and the AHM train. So, I mean, our testing is unique we service our entire community now. It's not just staff, students, it's everybody, which has been phenomenal. So it was huge. They built a lot of what I walked into, and they said, "Here, take this over." But I mean, it was cool that they had already set all this up. So had we not had that in place, a lot of schools in the area suffered a lot more than we did, and were drawn off of what they need to do on the day-to-day because they don't have 11 people who do nothing but COVID. They don't have a testing team who does nothing but testing. They are required to have a nurse who has other jobs or an office staff who has other jobs to do those things. So it's been awesome. The team, the group that I work with is fantastic. They are top notch, and a lot of accolades should go to them. They are phenomenal.
It's interesting. We got hit hard early, right? Quicker than everybody else. We were hit with quite a few cases and quarantines. And so we jumped in this path, and I've talked to a lot of other superintendents said, yeah, good idea. So they're trying to do those, but there are no longer any workers out there. We've hired many of them, the health workers. They've essentially said, you hired everybody. So it was just first to the trough for us. And it was a blessing in disguise that we were hit so hard early with COVID.
And Pete may be on the front line of this as well, but I think it's San Francisco Unified or maybe Oakland Unified, who's given a 48-hour ultimatum to their district as they are negotiating because they didn't do a lot of these things, and now their staff is completely overwhelmed and unable to do their function. And so we're not in that situation, thankfully. We do have some sick teachers. We do have some students that are not able to come, but we are functioning and we are stable for the most part. And some schools are not that way.
Yeah.
So thank you for getting that groundwork done and for stepping in and taking over such a big project. So we're in a good place as far as that goes, in my opinion.
Who knew 2 years ago, right, when we were here, that 2 years later, we would be analyzing, disease numbers and running a health clinic and using applications and, that this is what we would be doing. And I think that there probably aren't that many places where you get acknowledged for how great of a job you've done kind of rolling with the punches and adapting to this new world. So I think we just like to recognize how great of a job you've done at getting ahead, getting in early. I think we kind of saw, or you saw, that that's what was needed and you did it. And, now people write on Facebook things like, the Windsor Unified School District's done a great job of keeping schools open and keeping them safe, keeping the kids safe and keeping them in school. So that's great because we came a long way.
We did. Thank you for that.
And just to add on to what Eric was saying, I just want to take a moment to thank the teachers. The level of professionalism that they have shown in compensating and taking over classes for other people, or using their preps, has been phenomenal. We're surviving because of the tight-knit group that we are as a teacher. So props to all the teachers and the other staff who are taking over when we do have staff members who are out. It's been great.
And that's not happening everywhere. We all
Yeah.
need to understand that.
Yeah.
They've really stepped up.
And there are not substitutes available in the county or else.
No.
So, oops.
Oh, you want me to go back?
Yeah, just real brief, just so you know, these numbers are skewed because I'm just a single filter for cases. They come in text, they come in emails, they come in, I have parents pull me aside and say, hey, so-and-so, over-the-counter tests have skewed our data. So not everybody's testing at our sites anymore. We are accepting the antigen tests and the over-the-counter tests as valid positives and valid negatives. So a lot of kids and staff even are not represented here because I'm not getting everything. It's by report only at this point. I'm still pulling all of my numbers from Crisis Go, which has been awesome. I still get all that data, but this is just a slice of, I think, what we're seeing.
But I think that the advantage is going to us because a lot more people now are testing at home and they're testing earlier.
Yep.
And so that way it's cutting back on a lot of people unnecessarily spreading things around for a day or two waiting to find out. So I think the net benefit is gonna, even though the numbers may not be exactly accurate, but I mean, look, the only thing I've seen that looks as good as that is Tesla stock in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't think anything else is ice hockey stick up that high.
No.
So I like what you guys are doing. The community does, all the parents, people are buying in to, hey, let's do this earlier and get ahead of it. So y'all are doing well.
Thanks. There's definitely a correlation. I mean, you can see it with the testing and everything else, but just so you know, those aren't perfectly accurate. And this graph is just a breakdown of 3 different unique time periods. So you have 2018, 2000. Well, I have 4 here, but I'm only highlighting 3. October 2018, right after the campfire. And so the smoke days were not affecting. So this is kind of like an average. So 2018, we had 1,575 total absences in a regular week. Remember that we didn't have 1,500 kids absent. We had that many absences. One student can generate multiple absences. So with a daily average of 315, a low of 259, and a high of 378. Then we bring that to 2021, just before the break. And, we had COVID cases. Total absences were 2,315 with a daily average of 463, a low of 420, and a high of 469. So it was an increase, about 100 across the board per week on average. And then now, so 4,226 total absences, with the surge week. I didn't even count this week. A daily average of 845, of low of 782, and a high of 943 students absent. That's a 63% increase from 2018, which, just shows you kind of the impact on everybody and just to reemphasize how difficult it's been on our community, but how well that the folks who are working on it, teachers and staff in the office, compensating for this. It's been tough on them, and they've done a phenomenal job.
I'm going to forget it, but I don't say this right now. To be honest with you, with all this COVID stuff, I almost kind of forgot about the campfire. So when we go back to our average ADA and all that stuff, we might want to, just thinking out loud, might want to have a meeting, see if we can get a meeting, maybe a bunch of the superintendents that were affected by that fire as well, get a meeting with our senator and say, hey, look, that 3-year normally would be good, but this impacted us a lot as well. So it kind of skews our numbers off of what a normal 3-year average would be. And maybe there's a way there might be some sort of an adjustment, not over a 4-year period or something, but just, hey, let's do the 3 years. Let's add back in the numbers that we lost from the fire. And then that seems to be an equitable thing across the whole state.
That's actually a really good point. I agree. Sonoma County in general has been hit harder for longer. So a good point. Yeah.
I know I'd forget it, so I had to say it. I'm sorry, Eric.
No, let Bill go. I was fine.
No,
I would
I'm
just,
processing this and I'm just amazed.
the mention I was going to make is that earlier when we talked about average daily attendance and how that affects our budget and such,
Yep.
you mentioned, Jeremy, that we had 94, 95, 96, right in that range % of attendance. If we look at this last 2 weeks, we're at about 80%, or a little
Yeah.
bit less than that even.
For the
So
year,
it
we're running
definitely
around.
affects us in the budget, in the pocketbook, in the student learning, all those things
Sure.
that we care about. But we are still doing our jobs. We're still functioning. We're still teaching some online things and giving some independent study work, and a lot of things are happening. But if Rich's business or other people's had their private businesses all of a sudden lost 20% of the workforce, which is happening in many places, it's a big hit and devastating, and we're still making it happen. So we're not closing down.
On that June 7th date, I think we had 80 people out, staff. And to your point about ADA, so we usually run at 96%. That's what we actually build our multi-year on. And I think we were running at 93% last week, correct? So it's hitting us, and 1% change in ADA is significant. So we're definitely not going to be using this year as our our best year. We need to do that 3-year average or the prior year.
And all of these absences obviously are not all COVID, but most of them are. It's nearly impossible for our very hardworking attendance staff to validate all those absences. They would literally have to be on the phone for months and months just to make sure all those absences were what we think they are, but a lot of them are. So the next, this is just a breakdown. It's a closer look at just what we've experienced recently. In order to make this accurate, what I should have done with the data is included the time period of the break and made it flat, because the reality is we didn't really record any of those absences, but I just let the average run just so you could see the trend, but you can kind of just see how things are progressing. And just so you know, the testing, which we'll get to next, is indicating a downturn. So we are experiencing that ride on the downhill that we've been waiting for, which is here. So just a glimpse of the testing numbers that we've had recently. So that first week back, almost 1,300 tests. Second week, 826 tests. And this is a 63% increase from our previous biggest day. So it's a significant increase in testing. And it really correlates with what we saw on the graph previously. There's a lot of concern. There was a lot of COVID, and people went out to get tested to see if they had it, which was good. Let's see. Okay.
So,
Yep.
excuse me, Pete. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at the left-hand side. So week 2, so that would be the week of January 10. That's when the first of those boxes of kits are sent home.
Thank you for that.
And,
Yeah.
and so these tests are, I mean, it's a question, not a statement. Are the PCR and the antigens in the table, is that through your testing regime, through what the district is providing? Or does that reflect any of those 4,600 home tests?
Those home tests are not reflected in here.
Okay, I thought that's what you had said
It would be
earlier.
hard to
Okay.
calculate those. Yeah, no, these are
Understand.
just numbers that I pulled directly from Crisis Go.
And
when
to
we got
the,
tested.
and the active cases then, you had alluded, that one with the hockey stick,
Yeah.
the chart. You had alluded to that those numbers were probably conservative because, let me just ask, are those active cases based on our testing from the testing structure we have? Are those the self-reported that could
It's a
include home
combination.
tests?
It's a combination.
Okay, so
I
all
have a tracking sheet
Okay,
that we started using mid-October because we're pulling from all the sites. So it's a master sheet it's a Google sheet that all the sites have access to. And in fact, we had a bit of a moment at the beginning of last week when I realized other sites were using their own sheet. And I'm like, no, you can't use your own sheet. You have to include your data here. So we include the testing that we get from AHM, and we include everything that we get, call-ins, texts, whatever, parent pulls me off, side on the street. I include everything in that master sheet. It's it's a decent reflection. It's a good reflection of the trend of what's happening. It's not a real accurate depiction of the exact numbers. All right. Okay, PCR versus antigen. So I think that, and I said this before at the meeting at the middle school, antigen is a really great test for determining how contagious someone is. And PCR is a really great test at determining whether or not you have a tiny bit of active virus in your body. And we're switching. The emphasis now is on antigen because we had a lot of people who previously had COVID. And if you give them a PCR test, they're likely to test positive again. So we are pushing people to use the rapid tests because it is a more accurate reflection of how contagious they are. Somebody might come off day 5, day 6 and still test positive with a PCR, but they're not contagious. So the emphasis has been on it. This is a CDC and county health emphasis. And it's also a quicker and easier way for us to figure out who has COVID and who doesn't. And our parents are doing a great job. They are reporting, they're calling in, they're utilizing the tests, and it's been nice. The impact with all of this, however, has been the availability of antigen tests, which is nationwide, as you know. The feds are going to send us each some tests. If you haven't signed up for them, you should do so already. That's on our that information is available on our website on how to reach the feds and get your tests, your 4 tests. But locally, we are having a difficult time keeping up with the volume of positive cases. So I have my feelers out. I think we're going to be able to bridge the gap between when we get our next influx of antigen tests, but it is hit and miss at this point. Trying to our main purveyor, AHM. I talked to the main guy there today, and I told him how desperate we were, and he said he was going to do what he could. And I've also have my feelers out in the county, and we are signed up for delivery from the county. It's just a matter of if I can get those 2 timeframes to align perfectly, we're going to be just fine. So fingers crossed we can do that. All right.
I know that it's a bit labor intensive and maybe it's not an option for us at this point, but in the district I work in, the kits come with 2 tests. And we actually had somebody breaking those down and giving 1 to each family. So that's an issue with time and people and all that, but it's another option and just need be.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know the answer to this. If we couldn't find any tests either, so I called my son, he was in Utah, and they had a ton of them. So I had him buy a bunch of them and ship them to us. Does our school district have the ability to buy stuff, or if it was available in another
So
state?
we do. Yeah,
Okay, that's what I assumed, but I wasn't sure.
it's been, that's another benefit of the early birds. We aren't paying for testing. So it's been great. And a lot of districts are. The other conversation I had with the rep today was a purchase model where we're spending our revenue on buying tests because we need the antigen test specifically. And that is something we may have to move towards, but I'm hoping the county supply will bridge the gap between what our current supply issues are and what our future will be. So this is a fresh topic, testing delays. And I know this has been an ongoing concern with our testing facilities and its response time with your results. And the labs have been doing a great job. The turnaround times have been phenomenal, 24 to 36 hours. And I know that's not been the experience of a lot of our families. So I was asked to give a couple of reasons why. And one of the biggest reasons is Crisis Go, which is the communication platform we use to, it talks to Aries, and we are able to record all of our boosters and vaccinations in Crisis Go. And now Crisis Go has taken over registering people for testing. So we can pull all of the testing data into Crisis Go and utilize it in a more efficient manner. However, Crisis Go has had difficulties in creating a responsive registration link. It didn't have a visitor, so you could be a staff or a student, and parents who signed up, their emails were rejected because the one that they're using is not in Aries, and so it wasn't recognizing it. So it's the test is there, and I can give the parent their results, and I do all day long. People call me or text me or email me, and I just send them the results. We're working on it, and Jim said he's going to have his fix by the end of this week, so fingers crossed that this will go away. There are also a lot of other concerns. People putting in the wrong email if they self-enter or it gets entered wrong. There's a lot of misspellings of names, and that doesn't go well. The labs in California right now are not just covering us. So the spike that we see is statewide. So the labs in San Diego we use, they maybe take care of 10 other districts. So if they're experiencing the same volume we are, there's going to be delays just based on the volume that they're processing. Although I think they're doing a really great job. If you are experiencing delays, please get a hold of me. Email me. I will look them up and I will send them to you. Our samples are leaking in transit. This has been a difficult thing. If you have a certain amount of boxes that you're used to sending stuff in, and you get that same delivery, and you suddenly have 409 tests to send out instead of the 30, 40, 100 that you're used to. The packaging was a little too tight, so we had some leakage, and those samples are rejected, and they have to retest, which is frustrating for parents, and I feel terrible when I have to report that, but it does happen. And honestly, some people are just, there's some over-testing. People are scrambling in and getting tested. If they're not exposed, if they don't have symptoms, and we really recommend right now, just with this peak, if you don't have symptoms, it's really, you shouldn't necessarily be testing, especially if you haven't been exposed to anyone that you know of. If you've been exposed, confirmed, test, but wait a few days after the exposure. A PCR test is going to take 1 to 2 days before it's effective, and an antigen test is going to take 3 days following symptoms. So if you start to experience symptoms and you rush in for a test and you get an antigen test because you have symptoms, it's not going to be effective. You have to wait that 3 to 5 days before you're really going to see the results. Otherwise, you're just burning through a test that somebody else could be utilizing. So it's a good cautionary mode for all of us right now because we're so low on those tests. And then, of course, the lack of availability forces us to use a lab-based test. We use the PCRs because we have to at this point because we're so low on antigens. And although we are, shifting. So what are we doing? We're creating a new link. The Crisis Go team is working on that email, the flipped email situation. We're decreasing our number of samples and boxes. I ordered more boxes this time, so we will have less packaging concerns. The antigens, when I'm buying them up whenever I can acquire them and from wherever I can acquire them. And we're responding to calls and emails. So if you're experiencing a delay in test results, email myself or Lori Monty. We will happily respond to you each and every time.
I just wanted to touch on this because a lot of people are wondering, are we going to go back to distance learning? Get that question asked of me often. No, we're not going back to distance learning. It is not legal to go back to distance learning. The waiver has expired from the state that allowed that last year. So distance learning could now be called independent study. It's a very different mode. It's not a hybrid mode where it's live instruction. It's just very different. But I just wanted to make it clear that distance learning is not a thing anymore. So if somebody is interested or worried about being at school, then they would sign up for independent study. The only place that can shut down our schools, unless we have staffing issues, that's a totally different conversation. But that could shut down our schools is county health. If we don't have enough staff to be safe at school, then we can shut down our own school. So just to make that clear.
That's it. Any questions?
I have one question, and it kind of relates to some things we talked about earlier. So the county has a regulation saying we cannot have more than 50 people indoors for an event or an activity, which is an issue with our athletic programs and our music programs and things like that. But is it also an issue like, I teach physical education and I have multiple classes in the gym at the same time, and there's obviously going to be more than 50. So
Doesn't apply.
Yeah, C1935 is.
So that's exempt, but not a basketball game with 50 people watching. So
Yeah,
Correct.
It's any anything that happens in the regular school day, which is considered regular instruction, and if that happens to be sometimes a combined class, you're still allowed to do that.
That's what I wanted to make sure everybody understood, that we aren't making things up as we go. We have regulations we have to follow, and it's not always fair to some people, or others might think it's the best thing, but we do have to make sure those regulations are being adhered to and take as much precaution as we can.
And Eric, we didn't touch on that in our presentation, but Heather just sent something out from me. It's to this point. I know that we've been meeting with Dr. Mace, 8 of us superintendents of high school districts, and we were, I'll just say, lobbying to modify that health order. We were really hoping for a modification to 20% of the capacity of whatever building we were in, and having families sit in pods, or limiting to 2 family members, whatever it may be. We met today at 2:00, and she's not going to modify the health order currently. She says if we get some different metrics where we're on the downswing, she would consider doing that. We are setting a meeting for next Wednesday to see if there can be some modification of the health order.
Well, what I printed, you forgot the last slide. It says recognitions on the PowerPoint. So
That was me.
all right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted, I mean, we've done it over and over again, and we were ahead of the curve, but thank you, Heather, for responding. Thank you, Pete, and Brad's not here, to all the staff that are doing it. Thank you for the kids who are our students, are adapting. Thank you to everybody who's sitting here. It helps to be, we invested early. A couple of questions. I know we're going to hopefully talk about the outdoor masking, right? And I'd be interested if you all have a recommendation rather than just sort of leaving it to us to kick around. But in the PCR testing, and I was looking at those 2 charts, not to get in or make anybody nervous about, where we're investing our money, but at some point, are you evaluating for those additional people we brought on, or the additional contract, I guess we have, for the PCR testing, looking at some metric or decision point to pivot to say, all right, that X amount of money and resources could go to purchasing in wherever, to go out on the market to get those antigen tests? Is that part of what, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. It sounded like maybe you were thinking about that, but is that one of the reasons? And in that vein, if you think we need to do both, do we need to allocate some more money towards antigen test acquisition here in the very near term? And do you think that would make a difference? Because we have some money in reserves, and we have, but if it's now's the time to try and get that, I don't want to have that question be unasked. If you think that would be helpful as a resourcing for, let's surge our investment in beating this back while we can to curb the surge down for our district, if we're able to do that.
That may be something we need. I'm hoping that the other resources that I've tied into through the county will allow us to not have to invest our own money to do this. They have quite a few tests, and we've done all the paperwork. We've signed up. I just need to know whether or not they're going to come through with the numbers that I've requested. And if they do, we're going to be fine. If they don't, then we might need to tap into some of those reserves you're talking about, if that is something that we can do. In terms of staffing, this is a discussion that, in fact, it's on my notes for the next DLT, what it looks like in the future, because there will be a point, and this is something that was discussed at the COVID liaison meeting in November, where the conversation is going to change, and it's going to be, there's no site-based testing. No, the masking is going to be optional. And these were county discussions that, they were having. And so as we move toward that, I'm certainly looking at where we are currently putting our resources and wondering what's next. And right now, we need all the people that we have. That might not be the case in mid-February. So.
Pete's done a really good job of assessing the needs of each site with regard to staffing, and we've made adjustments along the way because we're not tied to long-term agreements. So,
do you have any more comments right now?
We're going to talk about.
Yeah, but
Okay.
just I want to last follow up. So kind of a wave. Have we peaked? Are we maintaining the same numbers? Is it kind of up and down? But because it's, if the numbers I'm kind of adding up in my head is based on the kids who have had COVID and who are getting it, we're getting to where a big population of our kids have either been vaccinated, but even, I'm even kind of putting that to the side. A big population of our kids have had COVID.
Yeah.
And so I would expect that our numbers should drop off kind of hard. I'm hoping. I think everybody's hoping. But is that kind of what we're anticipating? I mean, I know that it lasts for a while. I mean, I know a whole bunch of people that had COVID 2 years ago, and they got vaccinated and they got COVID again anyway. So this new little variant is he doesn't punch very hard, but he sure punches a lot of people. So, so to speak, or it seems like. So anyhow, I didn't know if that's what we're kind of anticipating or gearing up for.
Might be a little too early to make any assessment. Again, I like to look out the window and see how many people are in the line at the testing site. And I look at that and I see just on a daily basis how it correlates with what I'm seeing in terms of numbers.
Mhm.
And I am seeing a decrease day to day. And it's, went from 409 to I think today's number was 128 people who've tested. Now, granted, there's a lot of over-the-counter stuff out there right now, as Bill pointed out earlier. We sent out 4,600 tests, but there was still that desire following us handing out tests. So it is coming down. We almost caught up at one point today before we got our session numbers from the night before with calling families and talking to them. So, which was not the case the first week. There was no way. I had people work on the weekends just so we could contact those families before the following week, because we had to set ourselves up, just to make sure that we were getting people the timelines that they needed so they knew when to come back to school. So
Okay.
I feel like, yes, it's coming down. I don't have the data to support it yet.
Countywide, according to Dr. Mace today, she said she's unsure if we've hit the crest. We've got to be close. And she's also unsure if we're on the downside. So she said over the next week, we may know more. That was kind of the response we got.
Yeah, I mean, that information kind of is important because we're going to talk about some of our options going forward. I don't even know where to start, but
Public, if they had comments first.
that's a great idea. Does anybody in the public have any comments so far about what we discussed?
The report that came in from.
Anybody? Pete? Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Pete Stefanisco, WDEA President. I just wanted to again offer thanks for everybody in the district for all that they've done. Throughout the beginning, I thought we've worked well and we've moved quickly on things. When it was stunning to see. Like I wasn't aware of any real big issues at San Francisco, right? But they came back on June 3rd, and the district wouldn't talk to them until the following Thursday. Right? I mean, and some of the things that we've been doing for months, that's what they were negotiating over. When we rescheduled our PD day, I texted Jeremy at lunch, and by 4 or 5 o'clock, we had an answer, and so I'm really glad that we are able to work together on this, because we hear a lot of noise of what other districts are doing and what we should be doing. But thank you, everybody, and all the people who pitched in, the district office people out in classrooms, being principals, it's very impressive. So thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
Anybody else?
I'll just make one more comment as a board member, seeing no other comments from the audience. It's just, no one at home can see this, but there aren't really any members of the public at this meeting tonight. And I think that is telling of the amount of communication that's been happening with families and with parents. Because people do have questions and they do have concerns. And sometimes when they're not feeling like they're getting a response, the number of people who end up at this meeting is indicative of kind of how many people are feeling that they're not being heard. And the fact that no one is here tonight outside of staff who work for the district, that to me is a sign that people are getting their questions answered. They're being taken care of, and they're generally maybe not happy if they have COVID, but satisfied with what we're doing with what you're really doing on this end. So just wanted to acknowledge that because I think this may be the first meeting in a long time where it's just been staff. I don't know that, yeah, so. Definitely unique.
And I know Jeremy mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to pick on Pete for a second. I can guarantee you that when you were getting your credential, never, ever in your mind, if you would have wrote a thesis or a project paper, or whatever, about how to manage this unknown flu thing, right?
It would have been a study of the Dark Ages
they
and
would
the
have flunked
plague.
you. They'd have flunked you. But I guess to the point, that serious part is, I just got to tell you all, as a group, how impressed I am with our bandwidth. I mean, this was a big deal, and yet a lot of our folks who are not trained in any of this stuff have got the material, mastered the material, then mastered the fact that the material changes every week, and has mastered the change and kept a really good, I don't know that attitude is the right word, but a really good disposition, temperament. There you go. A really good temperament in dealing with our families and our kids. And it's impressive. And I'm impressed. I always tell people, what do you look for when you're electing somebody? I said, I always want the smart people. And why? Because I figure they can get more information, they can process it and make wise decisions. So I just want to say that I feel very lucky that we are surrounded by a bunch of people in our district that have a lot of bandwidth, that have chosen to take in that bandwidth and focus it on our kids and educate our kids, but in time of need are able to take that bandwidth and shift it into other areas that are more needed at the time. And I just want to our whole district, I just, because we have friends in other districts and in other parts of the states, and they are not enjoying the fruits of your labors in their districts. And a lot of them, it's just not as good. And so to everybody who, our whole district, I think as a board, we agree 100% how blessed we all feel that we are able to have good people with incredible bandwidth to take this thing on at this time. And with the spirit and what was the word you used? The temperament that you display to all our friends and family. And we appreciate it all. So with that said, we'd like to, I think we kind of want to bring it back to the board, discuss a little bit about masking, what our different options are, maybe not. And I'd like to open up to everybody's different thoughts. If somebody wants to
You
lead
asked
off.
if I had a recommendation.
Yes, I think that would be a good.
Here's what's tricky about that question.
Thanks.
We really deciphered this maybe 2 days ago. So as a team, we haven't discussed this as a team. So if you're asking for my recommendation, I'm unsure. We initially did this for the reasons that Rich stated, right? Because of student quarantines. I think it's an interesting time if we were to remove it because we have such a surge. So I don't know what that tells our community. But to Rich's point, we did start this for a different reason. So it's kind of it's a difficult discussion, and I hate to leave you out to dry here and not give you a recommendation, but I'm unsure.
Okay, I appreciate your candor. It seems to me there's two maskings, and at least the first doesn't seem to be under debate, and that's maintaining the masking inside the classrooms. So
Correct.
Indoor activities, they're masked. I was leaning after the November and December meetings to really look hard at the outdoor masking removal.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the reasons that you just said, Jeremy, I think we need to wait another month. I think we need to get over this cusp of the Omicron virus. We need to get over this, which is really, our next meeting is February 17th. And I would imagine if this home testing and the herd immunity and a number of other things take hold, we're getting brilliant data every week, and thank you very much, you and Heather and everybody else on the team for pushing that out. But it would seem to me if that hockey stick starts to whatever it is when it goes down in the graph, then I think the time is right. But I think it is a different discussion from when we were over at the middle school talking about it. Didn't talk about it so much in December. We didn't have this kind of circumstance, this epidemiology with the new beast that's there where, It's incredibly contagious, unfortunately, not particularly difficult when people get sick. So that's sort of my starting point, because I think the dynamics and the nature of the discussion of what we're talking about, from sickness, illness, interruption. And one of the interesting things, that's why I was spending so much time with Pete about the testing aspect with isolation, but particularly quarantine. I mean, if we don't have the capacity to get, and I mean, I think we're going to transition out of PCR for a number of different reasons, the agility of it being one of the big ones. But if we don't have that ability for antigen rapid tests to get that 5-day negative to return, what we're exposing is, all right, masks can be out outside. There's the group tracing, and that's all triggered by no symptoms. And I just think that the nature of the debate with Omicron has changed, that it may be prudent on a month-to-month basis when we get together to really seriously look at potentially unmasking outside, but not yet. That's my 2 cents on it.
To your point, Bill, I agree with you. I think that's really what my answer is. If you're asking for my advice, I think the message that we send when we're in the middle of a surge to modify our masking policy probably wouldn't be the right message.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my main points of emphasis, is that numbers are higher now than they ever have been. We want everybody to be as cautious as they can be. And if we say, oh, let's backtrack a bit, that kind of defeats the purpose of saying we're being really strong and we want this to go away and to get better. Also, before we started our meeting, we were delivered some N95 masks, and that's a recommendation now. Masking has become kind of a trend, I guess you could say. Everybody had their own homemade ones, or they took a hospital mask, or they had a Korean 95 or a 3M 95, whatever the different brands were. And so now if we say, oh, we don't need a mask at all, when everybody else is saying, not everybody, but a lot of experts are saying, make sure you get the proper mask.
Yeah, I think we can't hear you. I mean, we can, but
Is it working now?
yeah.
Okay, sorry. I don't know if I bumped it or what happened, but I just think that that'd be a step in the wrong direction, in my opinion. I work in Napa County. We've had, masking outside is optional. The latest in the community over there is that now it's a strongly recommended instead of being an optional. So they're trending toward more masking outdoors than we've been required to do. And I think if we, like Bill mentioned, maybe another month or so until we know what the numbers look like, and everybody's used to it at this point. The weather's pretty nice lately. We can not have to be as concerned about the indoor-outdoor weather aspect of it. It may change tomorrow. I don't know, but
Actually, in a week and a half.
a week and a half or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But I still think it'd be a misstep to go away from the mandate that we have now, or the requirements that we have now.
So I want to ask a question about what other districts are doing, because as Eric just said, it's optional and now strongly recommended in his district. We have a mandate for outdoors. I don't think that's what all of the schools in Sonoma County are doing for that elementary. So do we know?
I know Healdsburg's done the same thing as us. They're also
Okay.
masking outdoors.
Do we know what proportion are not?
I couldn't tell you that, Stephanie. I'm sorry. This
Okay.
is extremely new. Honestly, we haven't, as a team of superintendents or county in general, discussed this change and having kind of a unified model. It's super new,
Yeah.
right? So I think we've just made sense of it. I mean, honestly, just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
So no, we haven't discussed it. I'm not even sure people are aware that there's been a major change, to be
Right.
honest.
Right. And I think I'm pro keeping the outdoor masking right now just because of the numbers. But if there were a sharp decline, potentially, because I've been waiting for this for the last 2 years, doesn't it ever run out of people to get COVID?
Right,
I don't know. I
right.
guess not. But I feel like with the number, like we had this wave that was like this and then that, and now we're like up here. I feel like maybe this is the moment when like everybody gets it and then there's some more herd immunity. So if there were to be a sharp decline in the next couple weeks to where we really had low numbers, do we wait to our next board meeting?
I could schedule a special meeting.
Okay, so maybe keep that as an option on the table just in case. And I always try to remain optimistic, even though we're into year 3.
Sure.
But,
Sure.
try to keep positive that it will end, which I think it will. But yeah, I would be open to just holding a placeholder for a special meeting in case we see a really sharp decline.
I agree with you all. And I remember I didn't like having to vote or direct or whatever, give the guidance when we at the middle school. And I remember the discussion pretty well. We were doing it because it was the best of the not so great choices. And at the time, I can guarantee you, none of us knew, thought, or even had a lottery guess that this was going to happen. And I don't remember exactly which one of you said it, or maybe Jeremy. For me, and I hate using the word irresponsible because I don't like when people make that kind of judgment, but I can't mentally justify us taking changing what we're doing right now with the numbers as high as they are. As much as I'd like to say, hey, you know what, let's go ahead and, because remember when we were discussing it, we said, we know things are going to go down. Let's just maybe hold off and keep it in place just in case the Christmas time, there was a little surge, right? That was kind of our thinking. And I was all ready to go like, man, I can't wait. Our first meeting back in January, rip those suckers off, right? And lo and behold, look what we got. So we can all think that we were really smart way back then, or we're just lucky, but either way, it worked out well. So I concur with the rest of the board and everyone else that we all have the right, we all have the same goal of trying to help our kids get back to normal as soon as possible. But I think the phrase with an abundance of caution, with our numbers being as astronomically high as they are, I think we should wait. Again, we're giving you guidance. If you think, if our numbers drop like a brick in the next 2 weeks and you decide to, hey, look, I'm going to let the folks outside change. I mean, maybe that happens in a couple of weeks when it starts raining again. Maybe that's, anyhow, I'd like to give you the latitude that if you think that you could change, well, I mean, as a board, if we think that it's okay that, let's say 2 weeks from now, the numbers really precipitously drop and whatever. I know that a lot of parents, their concern was with the kids wearing masks outside when it was raining.
Yes.
I looked today for construction stuff. It's supposed to start raining, I think, if February 2nd or 3rd is the next one they anticipate. So maybe in consulting with Pete and our numbers, if you see our numbers drop a lot and you want to change it, I'm okay with that. I mean, I don't know how we would tell you that other than individually weighing in. But I think prudent wise, maybe we need to take till our next board meeting, regularly scheduled meeting, and take a better snapshot look at it. And that, because I do know a lot of kids who had COVID that have got it again. And so that's part of my concern, is that a lot of us, I don't know when I say a lot of us, it has been discussed a lot in public, that's the right way to say it, that if you got COVID, that you're immune to it and whatever. And yet I'm seeing a ton of people that have had it that are getting it again. And so, I mean, my daughter, she probably wouldn't care. She was one of the first people in college 2 years ago, got it. And she got it again about 2 or 3 weeks ago and got it just as sick. And, not like the mild one, just she got sick a lot. So I think we should, let's wait.
That was cool. Right?
Yeah, let's not, although I was going to say, hey, look, they have said that the masks aren't really that effective. And that's for a different discussion. But our kids are used to it. They're okay with it. I don't want to go off and then back on. I don't want to go back and forth. So I think let's just go ahead and, if everybody agrees, to go ahead and just keep our guidance as it is. But does anybody have any comments about Superintendent, if he sees things change a lot?
I do. I think rather than delegating, and not that I do not trust Superintendent Decker and his team and Pete and the sub-team on it, I think at this point, if you feel you need to convene us in a special meeting, you can get us together on 24 hours notice. If there's that dramatic, I think Stephanie had a good point. Because this is a big step.
Yes.
And I very much would like to avoid unmask and have to mask again.
Okay.
So if you see whatever that'll be, right? let us know and we can address that and, you know, figure out perhaps a way, Heather, when your next communication said, we had a heartfelt talk about it, here's where we are. You know, I was just looking when you were talking about in November, and that's that speed bump time that I was looking at the big chart where Pete had to go from a top of 50. I think we had them in increments of 5 or 10. And now that chart goes to 250 and looks like we may go over 250 next week. So no, I think this was a good discussion. Thank you very much. I mean, that was nearly an hour, and I think it clearly is worth that hour because it's the biggest thing that's affecting us. And I cannot tell you how proud and impressed I am. I know we hear it when we're out and around about people saying, you know, boy, all that extra stuff you did up in Windsor back in August and September, many people thought, oh, why are you overreacting up there? Well, you know, it's prudent, and thank you guys for taking the lead on that like we do in many other things.
Great. Anything else on this issue? We're all good? No more public comment? All righty. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's input. All right, we're going to move on to 5.2, expanded TK pre-K marketing update. This is going to be Heather Bailey and Jessica.
Hi, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Heather Bailey. I'm the new coordinator of district communications. I used to be the editor of the Windsor Times and was a senior editor for SoCo News. This is Jessica Borland. She's our coordinator of child development. She's had a huge resume at WUSD already, but I think she'd probably say her heart is really in early childhood education. So I'm here to talk about our marketing strategy for the new TK pre-K program, and Jessica's here in case you have any questions about the program itself. That's really her area of expertise. Sorry. So for those that weren't at the last meeting, starting in the 2022-23 school year, the Windsor Unified School District will be offering free universal full-day pre-K TK for all children who've had their 4th birthday by September 2nd. This is coming 3 years ahead of the governor's mandate for this program. So oddly enough, one of the most challenging parts of bringing this program to fruition was coming up with a name. We had a lot of input, both from teachers, from administrators, from the community members. We spoke to parents, and there really was a divide between, is it TK, is it preschool, is it pre-K? So ultimately, when we sort of got to the point where we wanted to launch this and we needed to come up with a name, we decided to just go with what the state is saying. And the state is calling it pre-K TK. It's a little bit of a mouthful. It doesn't really roll off the tongue, but we think for now, the best thing to do is just align with what the state is calling their program. If the state changes it in the future, or we really see that a name is really emerging among families from a marketing perspective, then we might sort of go with that name in the future. But for now, we're following what the state is saying. So these are the particulars of the program as we know it now. Obviously, Jessica and her team are still building the program. So we're a little bit launching the airplane while we're still adding the propellers and the wheels here. But the things to note is there's going to be no cost to families for this program. It's going to be a full school day. There'll be classrooms at Maddie and at Cali. We are implementing this program 3 years ahead of the mandate. This program is really meant as a stepping stone a little bit between preschool and kindergarten. It is optional in California. Children are not required to attend school until they turn 6. Teachers for this program will have the K-6 teaching credential. They also have to have 24 units of early childhood development. The curriculum, which is still being planned and developed, but it's going to be based on sort of the whole child's needs. It'll include opportunities for learning language, art skills, math concepts. There's going to be art projects, quiet areas, free play time to help promote creativity. Starting out, the class ratios are expected to be 12 students to a teacher or teaching assistant, and transition to 10 students to 1 teacher by the 2023-2024 school year.
Can I interject on that last bullet point, how important it is about the curriculum? Because there's a lot of different ways to teach 4-year-olds, and there is a very academically focused way. But we want to make sure we reiterate that this is going to be a whole child, play-based, as well as academic program for our families, the 6 people watching at home, to make sure that everybody understands that. And Jessica, if you want to elaborate, feel free.
Yeah, I was going to elaborate a little bit more on this slide. And I'm not sure if you guys know some of the stuff that's coming down from Gavin Newsom and his push to have extended learning opportunities for all 4-year-olds. And the program that we're implementing is a portion of that. And there's a lot of funding that are going into redeveloping, preschool and early childhood development throughout the entire state. One of the things that the state is working on is that we have a universal TK planning guide, and they're revamping all of the standards, the preschool standards through 3rd grade. And so the planning guide is requiring us to use some of the preschool standards in our curriculum planning, and trying to figure out how the kids are going to get those same preschool standards throughout any program that they choose. If they choose to do a private preschool or a state preschool system or Head Start program, how are we going to, as a community, ensure that they're all getting that same level of, early childhood education and support to move into a K-12 system. So there's, at the state level, there's still a lot of planning that's going into it. At this point, they're asking, it's a 1-to-12 ratio, which is going to move to a 1-to-10 ratio. That second adult is only required to be an instructional aide, like any typical instructional aide. But there is a planning to possibly have that person have a minimum of 12 units of ECE too. So there's a lot of stuff changing. I just went to a webinar on Tuesday that had more guidance come out. So this is another thing that, there's a lot of moving pieces in what's happening here.
Can I ask a question now, or should I wait?
You can, yeah.
Okay, kind of connects to what you were talking about. So I know it mentions there that it will be happening at Maddie and Cali. Is the Cali program expected or being considered that it will be dual immersion, or will it be traditional English speaking?
Dual immersion, yes.
Okay, because that was advertised that way a bit in the newsletter that they send out to their staff, and I hadn't heard that in the past, so I wanted to make sure I had the right information there.
And they currently have a TK program that's a full immersion program, just like their kindergarten program. So any TK program that they offer there is going to be part of their immersion.
So will the students that initially enroll in a pre-K or TK kind of be automatically guaranteed a spot when they get to kindergarten,
Yes, they will.
even if they're out of district?
Yes, they will. Mhm.
Okay, great. That's what I hope to hear. So.
And before you go to the next slide, I just want to say, in some ways, we were launching this a little early, as I said, like we're the particulars of the program, but we felt that it was important to sort of get this out here now because a lot of private preschools, private schools, they're requiring deposits at this time of year. And we wanted to make sure that our families knew they had an option that wasn't going to cost them money. So we decided it was important to get the messaging out, even if we don't have all of the particulars quite finished yet. So for my messaging, obviously a big one that we've harped on is that it's free. Our start date is this fall. We've emphasized the full day. So it's not, you don't have to pick your kid up at 12:30. That we're using fully certified and credentialed teachers. That our curriculum is going to balance sort of that learning academics with also playing creative time. And also that it's a really good class size ratio. It's not going to be one person in a room with 40 teeny tiny kiddos.
And I just want to point out that the full day, another one of the things that Gavin Newsom has put into play is before and after school programs. And there's additional funding that's being provided by the state to offer a 9-hour day for any family that needs it. So a full day is the full 9 hours if the families are needing that much.
And are we expecting that, meals and transportation will be included as well, or will that be optional for families to buy into that? Even though it's free. So.
Yeah, meals are currently part of the initiative and are going to be free for all. And that does include meals for the extended learning portion of it.
Great.
Transportation, there's not a lot of guidance on how transportation needs to fit into that 9-hour day. And I have talked to transportation about how they might service our younger students and car seats. And so they're part of the conversations. They're not necessary. I haven't talked to them a lot about the extended day portion of transportation, though.
And Eric, to your point, these would be our kids. So just like we would transport a kinder or first grader, we would transport these guys the same way. So after school would be different, obviously, or before.
Not going to drive somebody to Cloverdale or Roner Park, right?
No,
In district only.
correct.
So I've done direct outreach to our current district families and staff via our Apogee system that we use. I've done reach out on social media. It's been on our website. It's been on the Maddie and Callie website. It's been on our Facebook pages. I've posted our sort of press release about it to family and community Facebook pages in Windsor, Cloverdale, Healdsburg, and there's a Sonoma County-wide parents page that it's been on. We have a targeted Facebook ad system running right now to parents of all school-age children in the Windsor, Healdsburg, Santa Rosa, and Cloverdale markets. It's also been on Nextdoor, and we have an ad running on the Town of Windsor's marquee out there on Old Redwood Highway. We've sent press releases to the Press Democrat, SoCo News, Family Life, and the SoCo News article. When I sent these slides in, they had just spoken to Jessica. The article came out yesterday.
Could you forward that to us, the article? Thank you.
All right, so I have a question, and that is whether there is a deadline by which parents need to come in, like what do they need to do?
So I have that coming up, I promise.
Okay.
This is just some examples of some of the feedback that we've gotten. These are just comments that have been on Facebook. What I've tried to do is I kind of monitored the comments and the conversations, and when there were people that were, especially people from out of the district that such as the person lamenting that they don't have this opportunity in Healdsburg, I reach out to them privately, send them the links to where they can learn about doing inter-district transfers, those kinds of things. Okay, so I also wanted to add a couple little sort of fun stories. One is 2 days after we sort of did the big social media push, Superintendent Decker was at his daughter's dance class and heard the parents talking about, hey, did you hear what Windsor's doing? This amazing thing. We also have had a inadvertent but good sign issue, which is families were so excited about this possibility that they didn't quite read that registration didn't open until yesterday, and we're signing up on Aries. The trick is that the only preschool program that shows up on Aries right now is for our NCC program. So I had the NCC folks come into me and say, do you know why we're getting all of this influx into our NCC program? So they have been directed to the Aries problem has been solved, and those families that tried to sign up through Aries have been directed to the correct location now. But that's a pretty good sign to me that we're getting some good traction out there. Registration opened for both schools, Callie and Maddie, January 19th, which was yesterday. My suggestion is that we wait and see what those initial numbers look like as far as people signing up. Facebook will be providing us analytics on the ads that we ran, especially the targeted ads. We can re-up our Facebook ads. They're slated right now to run through January 30th. We could also consider some advertising packages with SoCo News or Press Democrat or Family Life, which is if you have kids and you go to the pediatrician, it's the magazine that's in every pediatrician's doctor's office that you thumb through while you're waiting to walk in. Now, Callie's registration window does have a closing date of February 8th. Maddie's is pretty much open all the way through the year. Obviously, if the classrooms get filled, then Maddie will have a closing date too, but Callie is the only one that has a hard deadline of February 8th.
Can I speak to that real quick, Heather? Yeah. About Maddie getting filled. So we build our new building, which is giving us some flexibility. And I have talked to ECC about their space at Maddie and let them know that we need that space to run our program. And so we have 2 classrooms there, and then we have some more. Basically, the current kinder wing would become a TK wing, or TK pre-K, sorry. And then we would move some of those kinder teachers. So there's 5 classrooms there. Now, if we get more than 5, we spill over into 4C's space potentially. And the reason that we wouldn't go straight into the portables that have been vacated by the new building is because there's also funding for facilities, but it's based on your capacity. If we have all that capacity, we essentially wouldn't qualify for the funding. So we have to make the decision on whether we remove those buildings so that we will qualify for the funding or keep them so that we can have more classrooms. So trying to balance that and figure out what our enrollment is, because if we don't have more than 5 classrooms, then we can have another conversation with 4Cs and maybe they could potentially meet the need for 3-year-olds or infant toddler or whatnot. We simply won't know until we see how this goes.
So kind of connect to that. So there's 5 classrooms available total for the pre-K and the TK, not just the new program for the preschool or whatever name we want to give it.
And-
Yes, for 4-year-olds, that's
For
what we should say. Just for
4-year-olds, yeah,
4-year-olds,
so-
we've got 5 easy classrooms. We can go up to 7, but that would mean removing 4Cs from their buildings. We could go up to 11. That would mean those portables not being removed. So there are options here. We simply don't know what the interest is.
So each of those times 12 that we're looking at based on the numbers that were proposed here,
24.
24.
Because 2 teachers in
two
a classroom.
in the room,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Okay. So
Obviously, we want to
potentially-
staff less than 24 ideally, right?
Yeah.
But 24 would be our capacity in each of those rooms. And we run about 150 students per at Maddie for each grade level. So, that would be 5 classrooms. No, I'm sorry, that'd be 6 classrooms. We're not going to capture all 4-year-olds like we would capture all first graders.
Right.
So we were thinking 5 is probably correct, but maybe there's interest because it's free and other places aren't offering. We simply don't know.
And to add to that, Cali is also, I think it was
5.
4 or 5. Okay,
Yeah, but
5.
only with the use of ECC buildings once again. They don't have a lot of space, as you guys know already. And in order to get to 5 classrooms, we had to let ECC know that we needed those buildings.
And my understanding is those 5 classes that Sharon has expressed that they only want to have 5 classes moving on.
Mhm.
So if we filled all 5 of those classes, then those would be our kindergartners moving forward.
Yeah.
So one piece of advertising that was recommended by a community member that I definitely thought was a great idea is when our classrooms are ready for students, we'd like to make some short videos, maybe do sort of like a photo essay, so parents can get a feel for where their kids are going to be, what those classrooms are going to look like, what opportunities are going to be available for them. But that's obviously something we probably won't be able to use to advertise for this coming year. It's something we can film and then use for future years. And then we'll increase our messaging around specifics of the programs once those get a little bit more nailed down.
I can't think of the name of it right now, but there's another publication that comes out in Windsor once a month or something like that.
Windsor Connection.
That's the one. They actually have a magazine or publication that goes out over the Mark West area. And we might want to throw some advertisements in those. I think they have some in Mark West area. I think they have one in Santa Rosa. And yeah, we may want to look to do some, because I know a lot of people, people like that magazine, they get it. And I think,
The issue with those publications for this particular time period is they have an enormous lead time. So by the time that we even decided this was a program we were doing, they've already closed their March one, and by then it's potential that our spaces will be filled. So for next year, yes, those publications are definitely on my radar, but to get into, say, the January one, you'd have to turn in our information in October.
oh,
That's
even the advertisement or the articles?
Yes, all of the above. Like I've spoken with them. It's
Oh.
a great publication. There's some good possibilities there in the future, but the time frame, their lead time for those publications is a side of which makes it a little more complicated. So
Got it. Okay,
The time frame that we're working on right now, it wasn't going to work out, but for
Very-
next year, I think it's an excellent idea.
very good.
I can
Thanks.
also add that the word has traveled that far. We're
The what
already
has?
getting inter-district requests.
Oh,
Yeah.
got it. Good.
Yeah. Are we advertising that it's first come, first serve?
know what our response level is going to be.
Mhm.
I didn't want to turn anybody off from inquiring.
Okay.
If we get absolutely drowned in people signing up, then yes, absolutely, that's a message that we can add in. But I didn't want somebody to think like, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's probably too late. I don't want to find out about it. I wanted to, keep it open.
Right. And then the other question is Cali doing their lottery system? So that's going to apply even for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to just make one more clarification that this program is essentially expanding TK. So it's going to replace what we typically had as TK and expand it to all 4-year-olds. So there's not a difference between the two programs. But because we're expanding to all 4-year-olds and we're bringing in a lot of the preschool standards, there's just a lot of questions on what to call it and what it's going to look like, and is it going to be a little bit more preschool based. That being said, we're going to assess these kids when they come in, and I'm sure that we'll have some more advanced classes and we'll have some younger classes that need a little bit less structure. So it's serving that full year before kindergarten instead of the typical TK that had a cutoff date of December 2nd.
And then Jessica touched on this briefly, but our sort of happy elephant in the room in our introductory releases, we did reference our plans to sort of expand this before and after school care to really create that full day experience for families. But that program is still quite a bit in its infancy, even compared to where we are with this one. So other than sort of mentioning that we're bringing it along and to kind of keep your eye out, we haven't done a lot of heavy messaging around that full day concept. But I mean, once that's ready to go, I mean, that's going to be an easy sell. Working families are desperately in need of what we're going to be offering.
Our intention, but we still have to run the numbers to make sure. Our intention is, 7 a.m. or maybe even 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. for our families of 4-year-olds and above. Basically, we didn't want to put that out there fully because we really got to make sure what that does to us. We know it's going to be a cost. So we know that's what we want to do, but we had to get this launched so that now we can lead into that planning. Don't want to have a sliding scale.
And that cost would be the after school and preschool, before school would be passed along to the families.
We hope that it's not. We're hoping that we can eat that because there's funding available to us now. We've got to decipher if that amount of funding is going to actually cover the program, which it probably won't, right, if it's free. But then we have to see how much of a hit that's going to be to our general fund and if that's going to be something we want.
Depending on how many new entries to the district we have and things like that.
I mean, I think that, not that I would advocate for it to cost something, but sometimes when something does cost a little bit, it still reflects that there's a monetary value to it. And it is the amount of savings you're getting by sending your 4-year-old to this program before and after school care and, the preschool day is just, makes a difference in anyone's.
Easily.
Not a couple, more like $10,000 for like a year, so that matters for people. And I think that having a little bit of, I think you were saying a couple thousand for that particular component. So, but I think it might even be worth it just to reflect, like if we would have to take a hit, maybe it is worth it to charge a little because of the ultimate savings.
And that's the feedback we got to the parent advisory committee. They said, you don't have to do free. They said, just what you're doing is great. Something that's cheaper is just going to will be fine. So.
Thank you, everybody.
So one more question, or Bill, you can go. I'll follow up.
Yeah, I had a question, Jessica, thank you. This is brilliant. I think while you were talking about that, it strikes me that people paying a small amount will recognize and realize the value of what they're getting. But to me, it's an investment into our seed corn towards the future. And it's simply a business model. And we started down this path with you to say, yeah, let's look at this because it's another early smart initiative to get in front of. I had a question about staffing. Is there the pool and we don't know yet how many we'll need, right? So we're going to get into the spring in a little while. But in your experience or rooting around, is there the staffing at the Maddie, and particularly I'm thinking, is there the B-clad staffing for this level of expertise for the younger kids at Cali? What's your thinking about that, and how we're going about getting those folks on board?
And staffing is a concern for the entire state. And there's a lot of people that are talking about staffing and how we're going to meet those needs. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's that we're going to, over the next 5 years, we're going to need an additional 260,000 teachers to serve the TK population that they want to
Wow.
expand. So it definitely is an issue. I have talked to some Maddie teachers and some Cali teachers, and there's a good amount of K-6 teachers that actually started in preschool and have the 24 units that are needed. And that being said, there's also a lot of conversation about how to get the teachers the 24 units that they need. I know there's talks with North Coast School of Education about them implementing a bridge program for TK teachers. It's on Sonoma State's radar. It's on SRJC's radar. So everybody's talking about it. Obviously, we're not going to know exactly where we fall until we figure out how many classrooms we need to fill and how many teachers we might have to hire additional to cover the additional students, and what their requirements or what their credentials might look like. The state has been implementing these 24 units since 2015. And so anyone who's in the preschool TK world has known about the need for these 24 units. So it's definitely a conversation everybody's having.
Is there any other?
Can I follow up on that? Because I think it's actually important.
Let me just answer. Is there any other unified or union elementary school district in Sonoma County that's starting this next year? Do we have any competition?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Mark West is not. I believe Wright School District is going to, and Pine Olivet might. I don't think that they've made that decision yet, but I know Wright School District is.
And I've heard of Brinken Valley.
Lincoln Valley as well.
Yeah.
And to follow up on what your question was, preschool teachers are notoriously underpaid throughout any private preschool. I think that I know our hope is that if we're offering a teacher salary, a certificated salary, which is what we're planning to do, that would be an improvement to what many of our preschool teachers get paid. So we might be able to attract.
I have a few comments, unless others
No,
have.
go
any.
ahead, because Bill kind of asked the question about who's doing this at the same time we are, even though it's 3 years out mandate wise. So that helps.
Yeah.
I think that we're probably the largest district in the area taking this on.
Yeah.
By hearing those names, they're K8, I think, and maybe
Around
1,000 students.
And how many decided
No,
to do it?
Brinker Valley is over 3,000. They're like 3,500 students or so.
I wonder, have any of them decided to do it ever since we announced that we were doing it, or it was kind of independent decisions?
I'll be honest, I kept my mouth shut. So
Okay.
I'm usually very free. Speaking with my superintendent colleagues, I've said nothing about this. I don't
Okay.
want anybody having this idea. So it was
So-
independent.
A few, one idea, I think you were alluding to this, but as we think about, we still have some declining enrollment. So as we think about right-sizing our district, really looking at teachers who could become certified or who already are, who would maybe want to move into the preschool realm from doing something else, I think that could be really fun for some of
a good
our
point.
teachers who didn't have the opportunity to work with that age group before. The other one is, I think that the fact that we're getting out there early, will probably experience the same type of success that we have with our COVID testing facilities, and that we will get people early. So I think in the future, we'll probably look back and be thanking you for doing this now. So flash forward 2 years, that'll probably be happening. And then I posted it on Facebook. I shared the announcement, and I got great feedback from the people who commented. So I think it's universally just people are very delighted that it's happening.
Yeah, the only thing that I had two things. One is I want to make sure that we are offering these opportunities to our existing staff. But even more so if and I don't know how this would work or can work, but if there's before school or after school stuff, we may have a lot of employees that they might,
Couple hours a day.
Say, hey, look, I don't mind getting to school early. I'd like to get to school, I'll work and do a couple hours with the kids before my class, then go to their class, and they might want to do a couple hours after, or there might be a group of folks that they might rotate themselves, or there might be something in a way that we can offer this to our folks that can help. You know, we can't control how much we can pay our people in a lot of ways, but I think this might be a way where our folks can make additional money by doing some different things. And if they don't want to do it, that's okay. But I think I'd like us to try and be creative, which you guys are, and figure out how we can make at least that maybe work, offer it to our folks. If they want it, great. If they don't, that's okay too. But see if we could do something that way. And then the only comment really is, one of the first things I noticed when I got on the school board was that this state has an acronym for everything. And I cannot believe that before Newsom rolled this out, he didn't have somebody whoop up some really cool sounding acronym for this program. I'm blown away. So,
Okay, that's what it was when it
Well,
first came
now
out.
it's ETK, early transitional kindergarten, ETK just came out this week.
I think there's an acronym out there waiting to be discovered.
Well, unfortunately, he used UPK, which is universal preschool, but then the universal preschool umbrella covers a lot of different agencies, not just school districts. And so there's just all these acronyms for like all these different programs that are falling underneath this umbrella. So there's a lot going on.
Great. Hey, we want to thank you both very much. Nice, great information and what have you. I just want to make sure, just in case, I want to get used to doing this. Is there any questions from anybody in the audience? Good. Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Good presentation.
All right, now we're going to move on to 6.1, consideration of approval of resolution 2022-08 regarding graduation requirements for 2021-2022 academic year for Windsor High School Independent Study students. This will be by Lisa.
Yes, it's a quickie. So just one more tweak. As you'll recall, we've already done one resolution. Going back, we've been meeting regularly with high school administration and counselors and realized that the new independent study, the long-term independent study program, Edgenuity is the platform, does not contain a community service project. So it seems to make sense, rather than continuously overburden staff and students, to try to figure out a way to pull it off, to waive that requirement for the current graduating class of 2022, so that they can still earn their diploma and move on with whatever's next for them in college and career.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa from the board?
Can you just give us a snapshot? How many numbers of independent study students do we have? That would be, I guess, seniors, subject to this resolution. What's our population look like?
Currently about 26, which represents about 7% of the current graduating class at the high school.
Thank you. I would move that we approve resolution 2022-08.
That's, we got
I'll second that.
okay.
Roll call.
It
Yeah,
is.
hold on a second. I just have one discussion point, and that is, for this year, I'm okay. If for next year, if this comes up again, I'm okay with this too. The only thing I would like to do is let the kids know in advance. My thought would be that we would have, maybe they can't do a senior project or something that's typically thought of as a senior project, but I sure think there's an opportunity for our kids on independent study to do some sort of community service type thing where they were still going out and helping serve variety of different organizations and different things. I like that component of what our school does. I know a lot of kids have done their senior project where they go and they help at a club or do different things and help kids. They kind of pay it back. And I like that concept. So I realize that this year and last year, we're dealing with a lot of different things, but I just wanted to throw that out there that I think, as you guys are working through the different programs, different requirements to bring to us, that maybe there's an element of community service that folks can do. I think that'd be really good.
So a little bit of a preview, Rich. If you recall, a couple of years ago when we used to talk about the dashboard, remember that? The bar that we measure ourselves against? What a concept, right? And the College Career Indicator is one of the dashboard features we pay a lot of attention to. So Windsor High School and North Bay Met Academy have been looking very closely and beginning to build the state seal of civic engagement, which is a new way for a student to be deemed prepared for college and career, and that would include a community service component. So it's coming, forthcoming.
Great.
Awesome.
See,
Thank
I'm on
you.
the right track for a change. Anyhow, so I'm sorry. Thank you. Is there any public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other discussion before Bill made a motion? And I think Stephanie seconded it, right? Okay, so we need to do a roll call. And
Stephanie Ahmad,
Yes.
Bill Adams. Yes. Eric Heights,
Yes.
Rich Carnation,
yes,
and Malinali Lopez is absent.
okay. Passes 4-0-1, I guess. Is that how we do it? All righty, let's go ahead and that's 6.1. 6.2, date change for the March meeting from March 17th to March the 10th.
Yeah,
Correct.
we have an update since we initially put this together. We were talking about March 15th. One of our trustees had a conflict, but we think that it would actually make more sense because this creates another conflict for a different trustee to move it to March 10th, which is the Thursday prior. So that's modifying this and for your consideration.
So it is March 10th.
It should be
Right.
March 10th.
Okay. Any questions amongst the board?
I'll motion to approve the move of the date to March 10th.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? And then a public comment too. Is there anybody in the public that would like to discuss anything about this? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. We've got a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0-1-1. And I think, let's see now. Let's see, what is it? 7.1, the 2022 future school board agenda items calendar. Anything that somebody has that they want to put on there right now?
Bill has added something that we'll make sure we cover.
Okay. Yeah. We have in our packet, it's labeled this time still as 7.8, which is the very comprehensive sort of month by month ed code board policy deliverables, which is always helpful to know what's coming up. What we have drifted a little bit away from is the sort of rolling list of things people wanted to talk about. I mean, our North of Errata group or ethnic studies or school start times, I'm trying to think. And I think that would be valuable for us to capture, particularly when we're down to one regular meeting a month. I know we've talked about a workshop. I think we're going to have a more expanded closed session next week or next month, but just something to think about, Rich, I think,
No.
to go and we can capture these things. I often wonder, we don't have the public here, and I always think that's, we're either not touching these controversial things or we're in front of them. But I like having that, and sometimes those things have come from the labor organizations or, staff. So not for today. I don't have anything at the tip of my tongue, but I think it's a helpful sort of parking lot. We keep those items up there. So that's my only point on that.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I'm pretty sure that I can get Stephanie to go back and look at her notes. There was a list of some things. And I like the term parking lot because there are some things that I want to, like the town council, they have a few things at the front of their agenda that they may talk about if something comes up, but it's kind of a parking lot. And I like that because there are ideas that we are all thinking about, but sometimes an idea needs to be out there and then it needs to mature for a while and kind of just, we think about it and it may be 6 months, it may be a year. And then all of a sudden, then the timing is right for that particular item. I had one on there and I don't know if that thing will ever actually work because it was kind of a revenue generating type of concept. And I wanted to put it out there, just kind of keep it in our minds. So that way, if an opportunity and as some people say, the planets all align, then, you can go forward with it. But I like the idea of the parking lot and some things we just look at and say, hey, maybe we need to clean it up and, this isn't going to happen. Let's take this off. And then we may add something too. So if Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind, go back and look at your old notes and maybe get it to Jen.
I sent recently to Jeremy kind of a list of the things that we had talked about in San Diego, which I think is probably our most recent parking lot. I think we actually did check off quite a few parking lot items over the last year. I think we've been pretty productive, but you have that. So maybe that can be the starting point of kind of just a simple bullet point, and then Eric wasn't there, so you should have the opportunity to add Molinari as well, and then we can kind of maybe look at it next meeting and just add.
That's fine. We had discussed this, the parking lot concept, and we had made the decision to pull it off, and then as
Right.
things came up, to agendize them. But we can definitely add back parking lot.
Well, and I think before the next meeting, Jeremy kind of as the hub and spoke, you could assemble those and maybe,
Sure.
Stephanie and Rich give that feedback, push that out to it well before and
Yeah,
say, are there
absolutely.
other things people are thinking about? And then, we're not having a serial meeting, but we're not waiting another month to
Understood.
figure out. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
And in looking at our 7.1 or 7.8, whatever it is here, it says 7.8, but I know it's 7.1. In January, we're supposed to be doing our superintendent mid-year goals conference. And so that's something we should look into potentially next year, next month. So soon, because we do an official review and evaluation in the spring or the summer. We want to make sure we're on track. So I think we're doing fine, but we need to meet with you to go over some of
Understood.
that.
Very good. Any other comments from anybody in the audience? All righty, we're going to go to, next meeting, February 17th, and our closed session is going to be at 4:30. It's going to start at 4:30 for everybody. All right, let's moving on to 8.1, meeting adjournment. Anybody want to stay?
I motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Stephanie Suggs. All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
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 Hi, look at your time at 8:29.
Look, it was,
Dang.
motion passes 401. Yeah, I thought we'd be out of here by 7:45.
Oh,
I told you not to say it.
no.
I know, but the COVID discussion was
That was
excellent.
Is that ours? No, that was important.